Good afternoon and welcome to Chess Book Reviews 137. Today I'm not going to look at a book at all, but look at some articles, columns written by a prolific author indeed, Grandmaster Raymond Keene. Ray is largely retired, certainly from playing, but he does continue to write. Sorry, just not the camera. He does continue to write, and one of the places he writes, prominent places, is for the British Chess magazine, and I've collected up a series of his monthly columns, as much for my own convenience, and just going to chat through them a little bit. The first of these is called The Mind's Martial Art, and it shows two gentlemen, and it starts off talking about Marcel Duchamp. He knew Marcel Duchamp's widow, and when I went to the Tate Modern, the Tate, became the Tate Britain latterly, Teeny Duchamp was there, a very old lady in a wheelchair, but nevertheless she was there, and Ray mentioned that he had been to visit her on occasion in France, I think. Yes. Various questions fired out here. Can you follow through when you've made a plan? How do you hold up under pressure? Are you impatient? Are you mentally lazy? Can you manage time? Do you play to win or to draw? And this is the central message: wider application, transferability, achieving mastery. All bullet points or headings, perhaps, that all of us can relate to. As you can see, the article is quite detailed. I couldn't possibly summarize it in a few words, but it gives you a flavor of what BCM is offering these days. Improvement of endeavor, the prevention of idleness, the training of far-sighted, logical, mental enjoyment. He mentions Norman Weinstein. I wonder whether that isn't a mistake. He meant Ken Rockoff. I'll have to check that. I don't think that sounds right. Anyway, that's as may be. He gives one of his games from a symbol he gave in Brighton. He has a long attachment to the town, as I think it now is. No, it's a city now. Brighton's a city. And there we are. He gives a game against Paul Edwards. There it is. And those are his notes. So that's rather good. Right, pressing on. There's a lot to cover. Here's Ray talking about one of his high points in public view display, the Karpov Korchnoi match of 1978. He was also second in 1981 one, I think. It says that he has been helping a young man who has the match between Victor and Anatoly as part of his university thesis. So my first question would be, how come you came to be Korchnoi second during the match? It says, in 1974, I went to visit Korchnoi during the candidate's final match against Karpov in his dacha country house. I think you'll find dacha could not necessarily be as fancy as a country house, but house in the country. This was a match which was crowned Karpov as world champion when Fischer refused to defend in 1975. And what a sad moment that was. During the trip to the dacha, I suggested to him as an improvement to one of his earlier games against Karpov, and then he got to repeat the variation in the very next game as white, and he obliterated Karpov in 19 moves. I think it might have been game 19 as well. once again, you'd have to check that. So I think he began to realize that I could help him if he followed my advice. So that was the first time I met him, but it didn't in any way suggest being a second because of his Soviet Grandmaster, and it would not have would be very strange for Soviet Grandmaster to have non-Soviet seconds. It's interesting in those days that Fischer Spassky was one of the last World Championship matches in which it was perceived as nation versus nation, as opposed to, ideology versus ideology or group. I mean, for example, the ladies' World Championship, which I've just been watching and with great interest, I have to say, in China, both the women were Chinese, and it wasn't a question. It was a question of dog eat dog, but not of national honour necessarily. Although I'm sure they upheld that in spades. But the point I'm making was it wasn't necessarily political. It was everything and more. Do you think there was any danger to Korchnai's life if he had won? Because Tal said that it was in the movie Closing Gambit that they might even kill him if he won. And you reply, I don't think so, neither do I. I think it would have been pretty obvious if they had. There wouldn't have been many suspects. It's not like Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express. I gather that Ray did a lot of preparation, actually went on a train for the Korchnoi match. Wrote it all out in longhand, which is absolutely amazing. What would you suggest he should play? Probably the open Lopez, yes, or the Caracan, or even the French defence. Karpov never beat him in the match with the French when he played the French defence. I don't think he had beaten him in 1974 match either when he played the French defence. That's absolutely correct. It was only when he started playing risky stuff as black that he started to lose. You can't blame him for that. I mean, half a point is... there was also, just before the Morano match, there was a game of Korchnai's which he lost to Hubner in South Africa. And I think that I owe this to Bill Hartston, who explained it, would have been a considerable chink in Victor's armory. Also, he liked to play the openings and defences, of course, of his younger seconds. Victor did. Do you think that Korchnoi was trying to win with the black pieces? Yes, you don't have to ask. I think he was trying to win, which again, I think was bad psychology at that point. Before the last game, didn't Dr. Erva offer you to adjourn the match? He did. He said, we shall call the match a draw and have a replay next year. I think that may be as a result of exhaustion rather than simply, political. He was trying to do the right thing, and Erva was a superb president of FIDE. And Frederick Olafsson, who's just died, was also a president of FIDE. And he too was a superb diplomat. I don't know about the bunch of jokers we've got at the moment, but for that I shall not presume to comment. Other than to call them a bunch of jokers. No, obviously they do some good stuff, of course they do. And here's Victor, puffing away on a cigarette. And it advertises Ray Keene's 206th book, Chess in the Year of the King. He's also written a book about Napoleon and Goethe, The Touchstone of Genius. I haven't got either of those books to show you, but I'm sure they're very interesting. Pressing on. Giants from the past. Here we are, Ray again. There's a photograph re-emerged on Twitter, recording all the world champions and grandmasters who competed in the celebrated 1970 match of the century. This was the USSR versus the rest of the world match. And one of the surprising things wasn't that the Russians won, because they were expected to win, but the fact that Fischer stepped down to board 2 and allowed Larsen, who had played a lot more recently, had won his share, my goodness, of top tournaments, to play on top board. Larsen lost against Spassky, one of the most spectacular games that I always enjoy playing it over, with his patent 1b3. But in the last round, the Soviets very prudently rested Spassky, who had lost against Larsen. They played 4 games. And Leonard Stein came forward and played as one of the reserves. The other reserve was David Bronstein. But they were on boards 11 and 12, notionally anyway, and they came forward in the batting order. There are the guys, with little Reshevsky in the middle, and the world champions, Petrosian, Tal, Spassky, Erva, Smyslov, in the front row, enthroned. And Bobby is not in the photograph. He enters history alone. I love that. Okay. He's talking about different age groups and how old they all suddenly appeared. That wouldn't be the case today, but for all of that, experience is not to be knocked. Chess was everywhere. There was support for the game, and chess players were happily seen both in the country and around the world. In this country, meaning old-style Yugoslavia, and around the world. Let's crack on. This is an article about physics and me. Stuart Rubin told me, Ray won't mind my saying this, that at school he did a physics exam, and I think he wrote his name, Raymond Keene, at the top of the paper, and then just put his pen down and said, you know, what else do you want to know then? And didn't answer any of the questions. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. 2 of the greatest Jewish intellectuals, Lasker and Einstein, were contemporaries and friends. I don't suppose they were close friends, but Einstein did write in Joseph Hannick's book, the introduction, and I've got that. I haven't got it with me at the moment, but I have got that. If anybody's interested, please mention down below when you like and subscribe, and I can come back to it and tell you. Einstein has the reputation, just reading a little bit out, of having been a relative dunce at his school in Munich. Yes, I bet he was. But this misapprehension, although precocious, he did not excel in those subjects taught by the gymnasium, where he was a pupil. I should explain that gymnasium does not mean physical jerks. It means the whole place, the academy, all the things on offer. And it mentions that 2 games of his Einstein's still exist, and they may be apocryphal and they may not be. Doesn't really matter, does it? It'd be interesting to know if his theory of relativity was apocryphal as well. A picture of Lasker, who as he got older and older got more and more photographable, if only because people didn't move around very much. Here he is looking mournfully at the board. During my 13 years at Dulwich College and Trinity College, Cambridge, I observed a curious phenomenon. According to eminent British scientist and novelist C.P. Snow, in his Reader Lecture of 1959, please forgive me if I mispronounced that, a major problem had gradually arisen in the international life of Western society. Snow described the split as 2 cultures, described it as a split, I've said that, with science on the one hand and the humanities on the other. He lamented this development as being a major handicap to solving the world's most pressing problems. We could be here all century and discuss that. Ray goes on to mention his own education at Dulwich College. And he mentions Nicholas Patterson, who was one of the who played top ball for Ireland, and was a boy champion in England. He went to He went to America, as did my friend Professor Reba. And he lists various people who would become presidents and prime ministers, including David Cameron, Theresa May, Vladimir Putin, blood brothers indeed, and of course Boris Johnson. I wonder how well Ray, I hope that I'll be sending him this little chin wag. I wonder how well Ray knows Boris Johnson. Anyway, here's Ray's game. I remember it, seeing it before, between from the London Boys of 1963. I'm going to show this to my very dear friend, my old governor, Ken Harmon, who came up in the same ruck. And there's Ray defending a French. The French was not his favourite defence. Cracking on. Garry Kasparov. Famous chess masters who almost ended up behind bars. Yes, this is interesting. The number of Fischer obviously did. Keres got thrown in clink, I think. Garry was certainly scooped off into a Black Maria and herded away. This picture of Steinitz here. Since Kasparov is unlikely to be returning to Russia legal jurisdiction, unlike the Braille foolhardy but late Alexei Navalny. Sorry, I can't pronounce some of these names. I doubt he will be overly concerned by this judgment. In other words, you're a naughty boy. Fischer, of course, was thrown in clink. He was probably difficult to categorize. Other incarcerated chess players, Deschamps, James Mortimer, Ludwig Pachmann, Vladimir Petrov, and most illustrious of all, Garry Kasparov. Well, I can think of a few. He quotes W.S. Gilbert from The Mikado. He's prisoner pent, a source of innocent merriment. And there is a game of Garry's against Jan Timman, which wasn't played in prison, but at Brussels. And a quite unnecessary photograph, although it's nice to have something illustrating the article, of course it is, of Bobby Fish. In the happy days when he was not in prison, but the strongest chess player in the world. Here's an article about Rhoda Bowles. And there she is, the fine lady herself, the chess queen of the early 1900s. From Cambridge University Chess Club, in grateful recognition of her enthusiastic and sustained exertions on behalf of international chess. And there's a game of Steinitz's, extremely well-known game from Hastings 1895. Women's chess in England. Yes, there was an article by Ray's sister, Jackie Eales, about lady players about 40 years ago in BCM. You might have some fun looking it out. And she wrote a column in Womanhood. Almost certainly a hearty welcome to our table. All well-informed chess votaries know that Mrs. Bowles is the life and soul of the now famous Ladies' Chess Club. But few know that she became acquainted with chess, how she became acquainted with chess. And here they are, all done out in their finery. And look, now that does look like something out of Gilbert and Sullivan, doesn't it? And no, Ray, I don't mean the three little maids from school. And the cross table of the first international ladies tournament. I know that George Thomas's mother won a tournament, I think in 1895 at Hastings. And it looks like she played in this and finished sixth equal. And there's a game of hers here. It says amateur. It's a Queen's Gambit accepted. I don't suppose it's the best game ever played, but never mind. It's a record of Rhoda Bowles' supreme organisational triumph. And it was won by Rudge with 18.5. And there we are. Lots of stuff. Ray used to live down in Brighton, so there we are. To show you the cross table. Splendid event. Splendid. Here we are, the Mind Martial Arts. Now, didn't we have this just before? Have I got two copies of the same magazine? What an idiot I am. Yes, I have. Well, RDK is not to be blamed for that. Chess and Genius. Mind sports play a vibrant role in the lives of many acknowledged geniuses, and the various mind sports, as readers of our venerable BCM will doubtless agree, chess is the king. To prove it, here are some old people going next to a chessboard. Right. Here's some people who've played chess. Ivan the Terrible, Leibniz, Einstein, as mentioned earlier, Queen Elizabeth I, Catherine the Great, and Napoleon. However, the first chess grandmaster, the first mental sportsman, the first genius of mind sports was the Baghdad chess player Assi Suli. It's difficult for Western audiences to imagine that Baghdad, Assi Suli's home city, was once the world capital of chess. And here, somebody that pokes in on every and any level where the art's concerned is Mr. Benjamin Franklin. A rather good reproduction of a painting of his. Of him. Of him, not of his. Right. I'll skip over this. There's a picture of Goethe. All right, I'll show it to you if you insist. There he is. There's a picture of a piece of paper, which is no doubt profound. And an old chess set from the 12th century. And the very first game of chess recorded from 1475, played in Catalonia. If you ever get asked what is the chess defense, or rather the opening, which is named after a region rather than a city or a player, the answer is the Catalan. So named by Tarsikova, I think. I'm wrong in saying. Pressing on. Chess comes home to India. This is a full-size outdoor set, I think. Chess thought to have originated in India over 2 millennia ago. Well, a lot of people think that it wasn't. I'm not going to argue with Ray, I'm not. But there's strong evidence that maybe it did originate in Persia, but I don't know. It's fun to speculate. It's even more fun to look through the various records, not just the old ones. So there we are. Short article by Ray, 2 pages normally. He gives us 4 or 5 pages, doesn't he? I just show you the outdoor pieces. Very ornate they look, don't they? His friend, the late Tony Buzan. There's other ways of pronouncing his surname, Buzan, or not lateral thinking, that's de Bono. But Ray was in cahoots with him and his wife, whom I met once. Tony was particularly at ease with children. One of his triumphs was the TV series In Search of Genius, where he took a class of unruly, comprehensive school children and over 6 episodes transformed them into model pupils. There's one of his Ray's games, a consultation game, which ended up a draw. Okay. Mind mapping. That's what I should have said earlier. Sorry. Getting a bit slow these days. Mind mapping. And here we are with Mir Sultan Khan. Sultan Khan came to this country about 100 years ago and stayed for a short spell. And it was under the, I think his master, he was very much a serf, thought and hoped that he would become world chess champion. But although he crossed swords with many great players such as Capablanca and Alekhine, he didn't quite make the grade at the very highest level, but he was extremely strong, and he was certainly the best player in England. And there he is with the crown trophy, which is still to this day the same one, I think I'm right in saying, wearing his turban. Interest was ignited because a couple of books were written, one by Daniel King, and Ray quotes the game against Willie Winter. Winter was quite a controversial person as well, because he was a communist. No crime there, particularly in my book, I can assure you. Triumph of Youth. Talking about Mickey Adams at the London Classic and Gwen Jones. And a list of Carlson's triumphs. You'll need those. I'm sure many authors far into the future will be grateful to Ray for what he's written there. And to complete this children's parable, our young prodigy produced a mixture of black pieces the next day against a miniature with the black pieces the next day against a stronger grandmaster. So he gives the game with notes, good notes, I'm sure. There we are, lots of diagrams, which I was like. Ode to a Friend. Ode to Energy and to a Friend. He quotes Beethoven. He evokes Beethoven, he doesn't quote Beethoven. Beethoven can speak for himself, and talks about the late Eric Schiller. I was in contact with Eric a little bit, and I met him a couple of times, I think, actually, in London. Quite by chance. Ray quotes his game against Martin Ovsky and Lawrence Day, who was also a friend of his. I'm sure no quarter was given when they played, though. Losing my braces. It's all the excitement of looking at games by Lawrence Day. And Ray also mentions his book published by Harding Simpole, 50 Shades of Ray, which is a parody, of course, 50 Shades of Ray. And here in a jigsaw puzzle is Mr. Michael Basman, who was a friend of mine as well, who died, how long ago was that? 3 or 4 years ago. And it shows Mike's game against Mecking, at Hastings. I remember that. Basman came up with the idea of bishop h6 as opposed to. I think Leonard Barton said that Mestel was one of the few players. If he played g6, it doesn't mean to say he was going to put a bishop on g7. And with Michael, one never knew. And a much more recent game against Christopher Morrison, who's also died in recent times. How sad that was. Scottish international, he also played for Lancashire. And here's Mike. And here is one of Ray's bugbears. People underrate Tigran Petrosian. I think you, particularly in match play, you did so at your peril. If you don't believe me, ask Botvinnik. If you don't believe Botvinnik, ask Spassky, who have both passed into the hereafter. And here's the cross table. The 1971 24th Congress of the Communist Party, Soviet Socialist Republics, held at Moscow, 1971. And it was a victory for Petrosian himself. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has gone on for longer than half an hour. I would like to thank you very much for listening. This has been Chess Book Reviews 137. Please like, if you would, and subscribe. Thank you for your time, and goodbye.